South Africa. Make sure that South Africa, you are counted with me. Run South Africa. Stand and make sure that our people understand that the need to bring revolution in South Africa is guaranteed that under the EFF, this country will be the better. EFF is a Tobatengi.
What's in my mind right now, it's what has South Africa done to reverse the inequalities of the past when we look at the justice system and the exclusionary policies of segregation which were rife before the advent of democracy, Advocate?
Well, I think before we get to be critical about South Africa, we must acknowledge that there is a lot of change in the justice system itself, which was to serve apartheid at the time, and that has changed. Of the hundreds of white judges that were there in 1994, there were only probably one black judge, and we now have the majority of judges are black and women. So that's a change we must acknowledge.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about quality. I'm just talking about the fact that it must reflect the demographics of the country. I think we've done good there, and I think we've been able to shift from the repression that was there under apartheid, and there are services that people wouldn't get under apartheid that they get now.
Yeah.
So there is progress that has been made in certain areas. Yeah.
And we have seen in this democracy, 30 years of democracy, we have seen the removal or the impeachment of a black judge, Dr. Hlophe, the former judge president of the Western Cape High Court. How would you describe his impeachment?
Well, let me first declare that I once represented the Court against Hlophe, so I'm a bit constrained about what I'm going to say to you.
Yeah.
I found it's unfortunate that it had to end that way. I think it's a conflict that could have been dealt with differently. As a person who was involved in that matter, at some point I left. I did feel a little uncomfortable generally about the way we pursue a black judge. We pursue black people and punish them more than we pursue those who killed and maimed black people, and that doesn't sit well with me. I think we could have done this differently, and I don't think it was a clear-cut issue for which we had to impeach such a great mind, legal mind in South Africa.
Yeah,
I do think it was unfortunate how it was done, but just apart from its merits, I just think I'm troubled by how we are unforgiving when we're dealing with any black person and their misdemeanors, and how we are told every time to forgive people who killed our brothers and sisters. And then that psychology bothers me.
Yeah. When we look at the inequalities that exist, the legal system or the economy of South Africa is white dominated. Why is that the case? Have we done enough to redress issues of inequality?
No, we haven't done anything. I think the entire transformation in South Africa, at least in the area of the economy, for me was a scheme to maintain white control and why giving black people soft issues like a vote and services there. But I think the entire political settlement was not designed to shift the economy from white hands, both globally and domestically. And I think that's where we were scammed.
So let's get the ball rolling. Thank you very much, the people of South Africa, Africa, and the world. My name is Titus Tsungu Erkoseramsengo Natswaleka. We're coming to you from Winnie Madikizela Mandela House in Johannesburg. Today we're joined by Advocate Muzi Sikhakhane, Senior Counsel. Thank you very much for coming through to the EFF podcast, Advocate.
I'm blessed to be in the Winnie Mandela House. It's a good name.
Perhaps let's start here. South Africa, 30 years ago, it was not as transformed as it is in the democratic dispensation. Looking at the representation of black judges vis-a-vis white judges. But now, when we track progress in terms of the transformation in the legal profession or the judicial system, how would you describe transformation?
Yeah, every time we define transformation, we must not forget that we transform in order to attain national liberation.
Okay.
Right? And so much progress has been made in the judiciary. The majority of judges were white in 1994 or 1993. There was one black judge and probably one female judge, Judge Traverso, out of 200 and something judges. And we've made progress now where the majority of judges are black and many of them are women. So we shouldn't frown upon that change. So there has been change in that in the area of demographics.
Okay.
And I think people have better access to courts, to justice as a result of that. And so that change, I think, has happened, but not to the extent that I would call we are on a path to national liberation. No, it's just changes that one must appreciate, but they don't go anywhere near what I think a country that was stolen, invaded, and plundered should do to reverse what happened to its people.
Yeah. And what do you think are the stumbling blocks on the way of transformation, and what are some of the obstacles that exist within the legal fraternity?
I think because the legal system is a child of the political system.
Okay.
Right. Anywhere in the world, the judiciary, justice, and all of these are children of a political system in a particular country. And I think when your political system philosophically is designed to maintain white control in the economy, well, there will be little change even in justice, in the legal fraternity, in all your other sectors, because your philosophy is one that seeks to ensure the continued survival of white control of the economy and exclusion of the majority. And so that exclusion and that control will reflect in which lawyers are briefed, who does what, who in your mind represents expertise. A white lawyer, isn't it? Or a white economist or a white... So the system itself has... this word transformation is problematic sometimes because it means trying to tinker with what you have. Sometimes you must create something new.
Okay.
And I think one of the stumbling blocks is that we are so committed to liberal democracy, what I call neoliberal views of society, when actually we should have changed completely our philosophical way of looking at things so that we could liberate the majority that were found in this country, whose forefathers and foremothers were here, who own nothing, who live in squatter camps, who live in the township, while those who took their land live in the suburbs and enjoy the economy. For me, if a justice system is unable to address that, well, that justice system with all its good things is not part of achieving national liberation.
And what is the relationship between the failure to transform the economy and the lack of transformation in the legal fraternity?
Well, very good point you make, is that because once you don't control the economy as a people, those who continue, the minority that controls it, will control how money is distributed in the country, in every field, in the media, in law, in engineering. So even in law, the money that will go to black legal practitioners in the scheme of things from the private sector is minuscule. But when you have a captured state like ours, which continues to protect white interests in the main, even the state itself does very little to change how the economy empowers, how you can economically empower those who were historically excluded, which is African lawyers, African engineers and other professions. So we've done very little, and it's because we're not in control of the nature of this political transition. in a way, we got a few things that we liked, rights and all of this. But I think wide control over the economy and every aspect of our lives, in the media, in the judiciary, in the economy, in every sector remains intact.
Yeah. And how is the state captured? You talked about state capture.
All states are captured. That's why when I said I don't buy this notion that there was commission, the Judicial Commission of Inquiry on State Capture, I didn't buy that notion because I think for me, and quite honestly, I think it was the biggest judicial sham in post-apartheid South Africa. A structure that was an abuse of people's trust in the judicial system, where you actually have a platform of what I call grand scapegoating of one faction by another in the pretense that you are dealing with corruption when you are pursuing one faction. and so all states are captured, by the way. There's nothing new about the fact that a state is captured by a particular group. It's whether that group wants to do good for the people is another matter. But what happens in states is that it gets captured by tiny minorities that want to perpetuate exclusion of the majority. If a state is captured by its people to serve them, to liberate them, that capture of the state to pursue the good of the people is not bad state capture. There is no state that is unlinked to a particular agenda. What you must analyze is what agenda is it captured by? Is it an agenda to serve a minority, a particular race group, or to serve genuinely the liberation of the majority, if not all its people?
And you represented the former president, Jacob Zuma, in the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, chaired by Chief Justice Raymond Zondo. You described it as a sham of judiciary. When you were representing the former president, what are some of the loopholes that you were able to pick up from the setup of this state capture?
Well, first of all, I found that even the notion of state capture, you will recall that the very first witnesses that were called were some professors from the US who came to agree that there's something called state capture, something they've not done in their own country. Did South Africa ever call someone who holds a different view, an academic who has a different view on the notion? No, that Judicial Commission called 2 or 3 professors, I don't remember, who came to agree.
Yeah.
And so for me, when you want to find the truth intellectually about something, truly get 2 opposing intellectual viewpoints and see which one survives. What did we do? We called 2 professors, both of whom were coming to tell us as South Africans that state capture is a concept that exists and that South Africa was there. But did we call anybody else to counter them? No. And who else did we call after that? Our witnesses that were handpicked to pursue a particular narrative. And were they cross-examined by anybody?
Yeah.
Not much. So I just found that it was not a very honestly handled. It was a very important commission to have, to look at what has happened to our state since democracy and before. But I think it was a disservice to post-apartheid South Africa to have a sham like that and call it an investigation into what is wrong. Corruption is endemic in our society, and it requires to be tackled with fairness and with justice. And I got that the loophole was at a philosophical level. The whole thing was designed not to find everyone that was corrupt.
Yeah. And in the previous episode, I was talking to Gogo Obrimatiki, who termed the state capture, chaired by Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, state capture 2.0, because he believes that it was the repeat, it's continuous, and state capture will still continue unabated in this GNU. But still, with the state capture, advocate, you represented the former president, Jacob Zuma, and it is out of that state capture that we saw the former president, Jacob Zuma, being imprisoned to 15 months in prison. As a lawyer representing him, Did you advise him not to go and attend state capture, which landed him in hot water?
You know, this is what is lost in history. Zuma went to that state capture commission twice. Right? First, he went early in 2020, and when it started, and remember he spoke about who was a spy and all of this, there was a brouhaha about it. So Zuma did go there, he was invited, and actually spent 2 to 3 days. We were there. Invited as a guest by the commission without even proper notice. We respected that.
Yes.
So the idea that he defied, he didn't go, is itself propaganda. The next time he was invited through a notice, and he agreed to go and needed time to prepare so that he could come. But the commission was hell-bent at some point on getting him to come at a particular time. And he did go. But of course, he was always unsettled by the presence of now Chief Justice Zondo. For their own differences, he believed that they had differences, the details of which I can't disclose, that made him uncomfortable with how he was pursuing it. But of course he went, and we advised him it was appropriate to respect the process. But when he was there, I think he felt a little uncomfortable with how it was being pursued, and in his own mind said, I don't want to proceed with this. I want this. I want to go there to present myself to someone I know is more objective.
Yeah.
So people say Zuma just defied. It's not true. He said, I told Justice Zondo, please recuse yourself. You are not the commission. You are just chairing. Somebody else can chair this bit. The two of you know you have beef between yourselves. It's actually, have to be honest about it. They both know they have some beef between themselves.
Yeah, they're beefing each other. They were beefing each other.
They were beefing each other. And they know what is a fight between the two of them. And so when he left, it was when he felt uncomfortable that he was being pursued. And when he asked for a recusal of Justice Zondo, and Justice Zondo refused. And people forget that I even said to Justice Zondo, you can get somebody else. You could have gotten somebody else. And he said, no, what if that person differed with me later? Which judge does not want someone who will differ with them? Because that's exactly what you need when you chase something like this. Someone who can test your conclusions. But he found what he found. I don't want to get involved into what the beef is between the two of them, but it's quite personal, I think, and political. And so when Zuma was faced with that kind of refusal, he felt that he wouldn't get justice. He supported the commission. People forget that he established it with all its limitations. It was unconstitutional to have a commission that's appointed by a chief justice, basically. But he respected it. So I think we advised him about everything that was possible.
Okay.
Even when
all the pros and cons.
You know, there's some prejudice, brother, for people to think a senior counsel like myself, Masuku, Babuza, the attorney, and others don't know that when you defy a court or judicial process, you are in for contempt. And a lot of people said, no, Zuma did not know he was ill-advised. And they went, all of them, for tea with him in Kandla to give him good advice we didn't give him. They have not told us. He defied them the way he told us. He said, I want to go to jail if I must. And as a lawyer, you must respect your client's views if they are not unlawful. If a client says, I don't want to do this, be careful about pushing them to do something they don't want. Your client can only do what he is emotionally ready to do. You must always respect that with big clients like that. They are not wheelbarrows carrying your views. They have their own views. And as a lawyer, I've represented a lot of big and powerful people. You don't represent them because you are cleverer than them. Most of them are more experienced than you, more strategic than you are. So be careful of lawyer arrogance. of thinking because you are a lawyer, this person must take every view you give him. They are entitled to differ with you.
Okay.
As long as they are not changing their instruction and compromising your own ethics.
So that's what panned out with the former president, Jacob
Absolutely.
Zuma.
And people don't realize on the day when I told Zondo that, well, please excuse me. As a lawyer, as an advocate, I was briefed to note a judgment on that day. And I had waited for 2-3 days. I was going somewhere, and Zondo kept postponing delivering a judgment. And so when I went there, I had a plane to go somewhere. And I did that, and so you can watch that clip, and you will see me saying, can I be excused?
Yeah.
And he agrees, and he goes to tea. What Zuma does after that, Zuma is subpoenaed, not me. I was not subpoenaed, and no judge can tell me to stay beyond my brief.
Yeah.
Not even a chief justice. I have a brief, and I can't be forced to do more than what I'm instructed to do. And I left, and the client chose not to go as well. But lawyers, we went there to tell the chief justice, deputy chief justice then, as he then was, to say, look, he's uncomfortable coming back. He wants to take you on review. So, and I think people misunderstand the man. And I think, for me, I'm not saying Zuma is perfect. No client is. But I think this pursuit of a single individual like that is unjust. It doesn't matter how wrong that person is. It's unjust to be so vindictive against a person and to throw away all norms of justice just because you want to pursue one person. I thought they got it wrong in the approach. I think we continue to get it wrong about him. And I don't think in life there's an individual we must ever subject to those things, because we don't do that to people who killed and maimed our brothers and sisters and our parents. We are told to reconcile with them, you see, and we don't pursue them. They pursue Zuma, they'll pursue Hlope, they'll pursue Mkhwebane, they'll pursue you one day. But the day we pursue those who killed our people in prison, who killed our mothers and fathers in the past, we are told we must move on.
Do you think the president of the EFF, CIC, Julius Malema, is also equally being pursued? We've seen him in the East London Magistrates Court on the matter of the alleged firearm discharge case, which has been dragging for almost 6 years now.
Yeah, let me first declare again, I represented the CIC a series of matters. Well, in that Dubuli Pune song, the first one, when he was still in the president of the Youth League, he was my client, and very good client, very solid witness that I led. And then I represented him on appeal when the ANC fired him. And I think he has been pursued since then. And I've told President Zuma that he was hoodwinked by people who were involved in expelling Julius, who said they were doing it for him as president because Julius and Floyd and Sindiso Makaka disrespected him. Julius, Sindiso, Floyd and others were expelled by people who were already wanting to deal with Zuma but needed that youth league to be dealt with. And Zuma did not catch it.
And he didn't see it coming.
He didn't see that the people who were pursuing Julius and Sindiso Makaka and Floyd and others were trying to remove a youth league that was his base that would have supported him. And I think from that day, Julius and others have been pursued at different levels. I don't think any young person has ever been subjected to what Julius, we forget this, was subjected to about his tax issues, about his house in Morningside, and all of that. No young person, for just expressing their views, should be pursued that way. I think that pursuit continues. Yes, he's a politician like others and everyone, but I think there is a tag on him that continues because I think he represents, just like Zuma and others, they represent the alternative. I'm not saying the correct, but they are an alternative to the usual white-controlled narrative, global and domestic, of what South Africa should be, this liberal democracy that does not really temper with wide control of our economy. And I think they are pursued for that reason largely. The same reason Klopp is pursued, the same reason Kweban is pursued, the same reason Arthur Fraser is pursued. It's just about everyone who does not agree with this kind of narrative that we're running. And I find it unjust. And that's why I think we are probably the most intolerant country in the world.
What do you think the GNU, the so-called GNU, will do to the democratic South Africa?
You know, the GNU is a continuation of a compromise, a betrayal of our people, recycling what failed for the past 30 years. That's what the GNU is. It will do nothing except prolong for another 30 years. If you and me can tolerate this GNU, you and me and everyone in this room, we must know we will die and leave South Africa and black people in the squalor and conditions they live in, and we are tolerating it. It's something to prolong the compromise that happened. You know, the ANC had a choice. The ANC, in fact, I saw a clip by Professor Bonang Mohale who says something so profound about this, which is something I've been trying to say about this GNU. You know, the ANC could have gone with MK and would have 55% nationally. Had they done so, they chose not to. The ANC could have gone with the EFF and would have had an MK and other black parties, the ATM, the UDM. And no, who did they choose? They chose former colonial powers because this is a script. It's a political script to make sure that white power remains. And so the GNU for me is a recycling of the very problem that brought us here, the very compromise, the very selling out that brought us here. The ANC and others had a choice. There are enough black parties, including the PAC, that could have formed a majority, but they chose not to because they fear angry white people. We don't want to. We will rather face black people who are angry and poor and whose lives are nothing. We don't mind that, but we don't want a situation where white people feel upset. And that's why this GNU represents that psychosis, what I call a psychosis that we suffer as black people of. We can't tolerate hurting a white person. We'll rather hurt our own. This GNU was not necessary, and it's not a GNU. It's a coalition with a white colonizer.
Is it constitutional?
There are elements of this that are not constitutional. You know, we are told, I did a case once where Zuma had reshuffled cabinet. And we are told this is the prerogative of the president to appoint. Yes, he must consult. But basically, we see agreements that were, I think, telling the president who to appoint. And that's a presidential prerogative, by the way. And I think the ANC was correct in its analysis. Well, not the ANC, some people who were saying, but the president has a constitutional duty to do this without interference by anybody. You know, so there's something a little unconstitutional with, and this comes from people who've been telling us they are constitutionalists. I don't know whether you've seen this term. Now, everyone who criticizes this constitution is called an anti-constitutionalist. We are being told by people who are part of apartheid. So I think a lot could have been done differently. You know, one of the things I want to just end this with, it was an important moment. You know, our lives, private and public, political lives, are punctuated by critical moments, and this is done by God maybe, that at different parts of our private and public lives, there are moments, and those moments are great moments of pain and precarious situations. Interpreted objectively, which is what we were to do here, to reverse what happened. They give us a signal of where we should go, and we've missed it here. And we've taken our people on a path of another 100 years of subjugation. And I think we needed to reverse it. And we failed once again, as we did during slavery, as we did during apartheid. And we had an opportunity now for black people to demonstrate that they loved themselves. But no, we chose a white party to work with. And I think that is an indictment on our psyche, on the psyche of our leaders, on what preoccupies them. And that is what makes you, as you leave today, go home, and you pass down and see all the beggars here, they are black. And everyone who's going to serve you at a restaurant tonight when you go is black. Everyone who cleans the toilet you're going to go to is black all over the world. And it's because we have missed these moments, crucial, critical moments that are divinely given to us to interpret in order not to selling our people out, not to sell our people out, but we miss them. This GN is an example of how we've missed an opportunity to change things for a black person.
And if, advocate, we can have a situation where the constitution is not respected, or we have some sort of a body or a GNU that is not constitutional, what is the risk that we are likely to face looking at the judicial system? If the constitution somehow, to some extent, is compromised judicially, how will there be an independence or judicial independence in terms of courts, being impartial and all of that?
Yeah, it's a big debate you raise. I think the influence of lawlessness starts at the top. And we don't realize that when our courts are seen to be biased in favor of ruling classes, when our president can keep money in sofas and it's fine, and all state institutions try to make sure that he is saved, and our lawmakers do the same, and then we create a government of so-called government of national unity whose fundamental basis is lawlessness, disrespect of what laws we have. That on its own trickles down to lawlessness to the general populace. And how can we tell a young man in Katlehong, in Tembisa, in Kiani, who's stealing a loaf of bread in order to feed his family, that it's wrong? When people at the top commit huge lawlessness in suits, in cigar smoke-filled rooms, and they do the same when judges do the same, when presidents do the same. And that's how it filters down to lawlessness, to drugs, to crime in the township and elsewhere, and stock.
It rots from the top.
It rots from the top. And we don't realize that our conduct at the top filters down to the very bottom. And one day, the poor will rise up. People will be upset one day. You won't be able to contain them. For now, people do these things because they think they can contain them. They are just lucky. South African young people have become cowards. Countries are changed by young people. But unfortunately, our young people are trapped in trivial pursuits in social media, and their anger is not where it should be about.
It's misplaced.
Yeah. That is not their fault. I think it's the fault of the system. It promises more than it can give.
We've seen in the West African bloc, we've seen Niger, we've seen Mali and Burkina Faso, turning their back against the West. We have seen also the issue of the finance bill. Is it Kenya? In Kenya? Yes. So we have seen the youth rising up to the occasion to really fight for their own freedom and liberation and independence, if you like. And if anything, do you think the time the youth of South Africa wakes up and smell the coffee, perhaps we might have something like an unled revolution against this GNU?
Unfortunately, I believe in revolution. I truly do. I think revolutions are the only things you can have to change a a brutal system. But when it's unlaid, it becomes an upheaval that's unending. And so that is why first I appeal to leaders to do real change, because if you don't, there will be an unled, spontaneous revolution that will be something like that what happened in 2021 with this so-called looting. You don't want that kind of revolution. You want a revolution, but you want a revolution that is philosophically directed, that has an ideology about it. But unfortunately, those in power don't respond in time when those things happen. And I do think what you're seeing in Niger, in Burkina Faso, what you saw in Kenya recently, it's young people beginning to see that they've been scammed for decades since independence.
Far too long.
And the leaders only serve the former colonizer. And South Africa is not far from that. It's not far from it. And I don't know what form it will take, but it's not far. Unfortunately, people who steal our wealth, who do these things, will pack their bags and go and live in London when you and me will be faced with the consequences. They shall have stolen enough money and citizenship elsewhere to leave us in squalor. And I think, for me, young people in this country and old people who have the courage to face things must begin to challenge even this electoralism, this thing of believing that we're in the GNU now, so we must wait for 5 years. There'll be another after 5 years. We must wait for another. You and me are going to die in the next 40 years. And we're going to leave this country this way. And if we want it to change, we must do it now.
What kind of change do you think we need to embark on, Advocate? Do you think 5 years is far to change a government? Can we narrow it down to what?
Yeah, you ask a very important. Many people say we must be gradual about change. You know why we say we must be gradual about change? It's because you know what you're going to eat tonight. You know what you're going to eat tonight.
Yeah.
You have a house to sleep in, so you can afford gradual change. Poverty is violent. You must live in poverty to know that a day
is too long.
Is too long.
Yeah.
You know, we say these things about gradual change because we live in situations that are tolerable. So you must try and look at the world from the position of the most downtrodden. If you want to know what to do, look at it from the most intolerable position. That is what is called solidarity. If you really call yourself a radical revolutionary who loves his people or her people, your standpoint must be always in solidarity with the person who is the most downtrodden, who lives in the biggest squalor, and you must move it from there. And so what I think is needed now is what I call a new republic.
Okay.
You do away with this constitution, and I'm not saying you do away with everything in it. You create a constitution whose thrust is national liberation, whose thrust is to shift the strategic assets of the state to serve its people. You shift it so that you have free education. Many people say free education is expensive. It's not. Ignorance is more expensive than free education.
Profound.
And so we need to make serious decisions about what we want. Afrikaners did this. They created this in the 40s. What we see, universities, Rao and others, there was no English. They changed the languages in universities. So we can do it. Our problem is fear of global capital and our inherent fear of white power, because I think they were violent to us for a long time. And we fear whiteness. We fear offending white people. We can offend 20 million black people, but we fear offending 300,000 white people. And we need to shift that fear, not just to serve black people only, but to create a country in which true non-racialism can thrive based on mutual respect between different races. Not this reconciliation scam, which means black people must do more, bend backwards, while white people live the way they did before 1994. I think we need to do something to form what I call a new republic. We need to go sit and say, here is a new constitution, we made mistakes. Here is the agenda, here's the Marshall Plan for national liberation. We must do that this year or next year. If we don't, it's going to be 5 years after 5 years after 5 years until you are 85.
But we have gatekeepers, the ANC and the DA. Will they allow that?
I've said this before. You know, I was in the ANC for a long time. I know no other organization. But you know, I'm not trapped in the ANC politics. We must imagine our freedom, our liberation without the ANC. All liberation movements tend to do this when they've been infiltrated, when they've been bought. They get comfortable and they can betray you. And I think we were there before 1994. We just didn't see it. And we've tolerated it for 30 years. And I think those who are great in the ANC, because they are, should know. You don't move from a two-thirds majority in 1994 and 1999, and then now you have 40%.
Below 40, yeah.
It's a signal. Not just this thing they're saying, oh, our people are telling us we must work with others. No, our people are telling you you've betrayed them, period. And you must get out of it. Get out and let people run themselves once more. Have a new constitution, new ways, new philosophy, new plan. Put in place a new plan that will take that young man to become what he has always wanted to become, that will take you to be what you want to be. At the moment, you're trapped, just like me. We're trapped in what we're doing because there's a ceiling. And we need to change that. It's time. We can't do this to our people for 30 years. We shouldn't have done it for 1 year.
What are other legal mechanisms? I understand the EFF is in a position to take over government through revolutionary means and other means. Yeah. Now, which other means are at play or are at our disposal, given that we are not likely perhaps to have the new republic under the DA-ANC Grand Coalition?
Yeah, another thing about law that constrains us is to think protest against an evil state is wrong, is unlawful. No, it's actually in both law and the Bible, you have to stand and protest against what is evil. And what perpetuates poverty against a whole group of people is evil. And so I'm not even suggesting that what we need to do is to go vote after 5 years. I think black parties like the Economic Freedom Fighters, MK, ATM, maybe UDM, PAC and AZAPO must learn now that it's actually what stands between the liberation of our people. What stands between us and that is their failure to put their differences aside, if there are differences. But there's one thing that they all share, is that Africans were enslaved. Their land was taken. Their natural resources plundered. And we need to reverse it. I don't see why black people who are politicians can't even agree on that, except those who are bought. And I'm not kept counting the ANC in this, because I think the ANC is right in the belly of a beast that we don't like. And it doesn't know how to get out of that white belly. It's trapped in it. It's trapped in its own kind of sophistication about Western modernity. But the parties that are outside the ANC need to force matters now, or else young people are going to do it by themselves.
A coup, maybe?
Well, we have had a coup in South Africa.
Yeah.
We've had coups. It's just that they are soft.
They're so little fragile.
Oh, yeah, no. What happens? Business gives your president 1 billion rand to win an election. That's regime change. So this thing that coups are the ones that are violent and soldiers with guns itself is not true. We must watch regime change. And regime change happens right in front of this GNU is regime change. It's a continuation of a particular version of white control. And we are sitting here saying a moment will come for us to stop it. It won't come. If we don't do it now, it won't come. And God can only give you particular moments, precarious moments in history as signals for your intervention. And we keep missing them. Mandela missed it in 94. We are missing it now. And I think the EFF and MK and ATM and PAC and AZAPO and UDM are truly the only parties that I think have some distance from white capital that can do something, protest, lead our people out of this. And they don't need to wait for 5 years. We can actually protest against something that subjugates our people to poverty. We can protest. By the way, when Zuma was kicked out, it wasn't through elections. White people and other black people went to the streets. They were called
Zuma
South Africa
must fall.
first. Zuma must fall. Yeah, so, and everything, and that
The
was
go-go's.
right. We were told that was right. But we were told we must wait for elections after 5 years to kick out a particular government. I think we are just being hoodwinked by propaganda, and laws themselves can't be used to suppress what I think is a fight for a just society. And I think if our laws are unjust, if our laws stand against national liberation of a people, it's not wrong to defy them. We must choose. We want to tolerate laws that want to extend our slavery, or we want to end it. And I think ending slavery of a people is a more honorable job than prolonging it.
And the question is, who crafted these laws that are anti-Pan-Africanism advocate?
Our legal system, our legal culture is based on our colonial history. And so a lot of young people believe that our history starts in 1652. You know, there were cities in this continent. We had African modernity. We didn't start to live in 1652. So anyway, when Africa was invaded after the Berlin Conference, and when Europeans at the Berlin Conference decided that they would divide Africa amongst themselves, a lot was disrupted. Churches were used. Religion was used to quiet us, to silence us. Education system was used. Violence was used. Law was used. Law was changed to subjugate us to foreign ways of a legal system. So our system itself is something that we've never tested African ways of doing things legally, because we've been persuaded that we are so inferior. We were nothing before white people came with Roman Dutch law and their legal culture. We were something. For millions of years, we ran society. And so colonialism was a disruption. But we need, and I'm not suggesting that things would not have changed, that we must go back to what we were in the 17th century. But we need a debate about how best to craft a constitution that deals with our history, that is rooted in our lives. You know, and when I keep saying this, read that constitution. It does not even mention apartheid. It doesn't. The word apartheid is not found in that constitution. You know why? Because we are so scared of writing something that would offend the very people that oppressed us. Yet, in section 1 of the constitution, we start by saying, we the people united to deal with the injustices of the past. Why? We know what it was. It was colonialism and apartheid. We don't have to use euphemism. But we use euphemism because we are a people so obsessed with not offending an oppressor. And the reason for that is this. Slaves were shipped out of Africa through the Ghana Gate in West Africa. And South Africa, here the Communist Party and the ANC say this all the time. South Africa was a colonialism of a special type. No, we were actually slaves of a special type. They just didn't ship us out. The slaves were kept here, and we continue to be slaves. We've just been transformed every time to become better slaves. People who are 80% should not be subjected to the tyranny of people who are like 20 or 15%. It's a sin, it's an abomination that we are ruled by a minority, that our businesses are run by people who are 300,000 in the country. Something is wrong with us.
Yeah. And I strongly believe, I concur that we really need to rewrite, the constitution. So the people of South Africa, I believe that the streets are calling. Advocate Muzi Sikhakhane suggests a new republic for South Africa, which I believe is the way to go. Now, Advocate, you were there in the apartheid days. You have seen the struggles of South Africans firsthand. Perhaps if you can just share with us some of your lived experiences in the apartheid days, how things were at the time.
Yeah, it's difficult. I personally grew up in a very poor rural area, right? Something most of you can't even imagine. People can't imagine that a senior counsel comes from where I was born. So I know firsthand how to live in a place where your forefathers were removed from productive land and put to live with donkeys and goats for one farmer to take that land. I know a time when actually an electricity line would be running across your village when you have no electricity to serve a white farmer distances away from you. And I knew a time when you actually could not even complain because you would be arrested. So there is a lot that I think went through. A lot of us went through. I told you that Aubrey and I were arrested for struggling. And a lot of us at teenage years were detained. And so it's been a rough time for Africans. And so when people think I'm just being maybe anti-white, I'm not. I'm actually pro-society. I think Africans have gone through a lot. Truly, truly speaking, if you go all over the world, I was in Europe last week. It still pains me that go anywhere in the world, go to any airport, the person who's cleaning your toilet seat is black. The person who's washing the dishes is black. The person who's cleaning the street is black. It's something we should get tired of, but we are not, because we've internalized it that we are the doormat of the world. And I think it's going to take us now to change that. Apartheid was a horrible crime where it was former. And the people who tell us now about the rule of law, all of these white NGOs, these are people who were lawyers when we were being
beneficiaries of apartheid.
Well, they were lawyers when Solomon Mahlangu, then 20-year-old, went to the gallows. And that's why I get very upset when I hear former judges in NGOs who were sitting doing nothing when Solomon Mahlangu was hanged. A 20-year-old. It didn't annoy them. They are annoyed that Hlophe is a member of the JSC, well, maybe a member of the JSC. But they were sitting on their laurels when Solomon Mahlangu was guillotined, when many people were killed in 1976 and elsewhere. So they tolerate certain things that are done to black people, and they can't tolerate certain things. And it tells you that it's because throughout slavery, colonialism, and apartheid, and now, we continue to tolerate black suffering. We regard it as not so much suffering. It took Europe, the Holocaust, to even coin the word genocide. The word genocide is made out of two Greek words, geno meaning tribe or ethnic group, and side meaning killing. Black people had been dying in different places, killed by colonizers, but never coined that word. These words are coined when people of another race are killed. And I think it's the time for us to look at, historically, to look at what Africans have gone through. When you drive out of this studio today and you drive home, look around you and see who's suffering and see why you tolerate it every day. And it's because I've run out of tolerance foreseeing, and it's not because I'm the most downtrodden. I've taken myself out of those situations, but I think we can't tolerate a majority of people, Africans in particular, in the country of their birth, continent of their birth, land of their ancestors, living like pigs. And they've lived like pigs for many years. And I'm not troubled much by that. I'm troubled by the fact that we tolerate it. We perpetuate it. We are fine with it. We don't even know where Eugene Koch lives. But we want to know what Zuma and Julius Malema are doing. We want to target Julius. We want to target Zuma. We want to target Hlophe. We don't know where apartheid killers are. Let me tell you where they are. They live in plush houses in Pretoria and elsewhere. Some of them get pension from this government. And we are busy pursuing black people for their small misdemeanors.
I think self-hate is a problem.
That is where we are. And that thing can change in a day. It can change in a day. We need an honest reflection about ourselves, who we are. We don't want to do it. It's like that, the refusal to look in the mirror. We don't want to look in the mirror.
The reality.
We don't want to say it because we've internalized the fact that there's something not right with us. We are second-class, subhuman human beings. And it's one thing for another race to think that of us. It's another for us to accept it. And that, for me, is what historically has been happening. Yes, there are no detentions now, maybe, but we live in an intolerant society. You and me are going to be in trouble for this discussion. Watch Twitter. Watch WhatsApp groups. Black people have a problem with us saying that black people
Clever blacks
suffer. Yeah. It's a psychosis. It's a disease that was inculcated in us through decades, maybe centuries of self-hate. We actually don't know where Dr. Vota Passon is and others, Eugene de Kock. We don't know where they are.
The architects of apartheid.
Yeah, we don't care. In fact, if, as I'm speaking, white people listening to me say, oh, why can't we move on, right? We must move on. But when we are pursuing a black person, when we are pursuing Advocate Mkhwebane, for 18 months in Parliament, ANC people, together with the DA, Freedom Fund, pursue a black woman. For 18 months non-stop, they are belligerent about it.
Relentless.
But they will forgive people who killed their own, who killed Solomon Mahlangu, who killed many people in Bisho, in Soweto, in Sharpeville, and elsewhere. We won't pursue those. We will pursue our own because we live a life at our own expense to please people who don't like us, to please races that don't like us.
Yeah. And how do we draw the line between politics and law, Advocate? Now with the issue of Dr. Hlophe being an MP and serving or having been elected to serve in the JSC. The JSC is a legal body.
Yeah.
And now we understand he has been impeached. He's no longer a judge. But now he remains a member of parliament, which by virtue of being a member is fit and proper to occupy such a position as a member of a parliament. Now, how do we draw the line between politics and law?
Yeah, there is, law is a child of politics, right? Don't know whether a stepchild, but it's a child of politics.
Absolutely.
And so this whole idea, the people who say they are for the rule of law in South Africa, they know deep inside themselves they are pursuing a political agenda using law. Law is a tool. It's a tool by ruling classes to capture states, to capture the narrative. So no one must tell you there's a difference. Those who think there is no difference are people who themselves are victims of that propaganda. So there is no law that prohibits Dr. Hlophe from becoming a member of the JSC. There's no law. They know there's no law. But it's this pursuit of this black person with the assistance of other black people there is no law. They want to interpret it in some way to say it's inappropriate. I don't know, but there is no law that prohibits him. And the people who are pursuing him, one of the things I said to someone yesterday, this whole idea of going to court to review Hlophe's nomination to the JSC, that's not what it's about.
Okay.
In law, they're going to file this review application, and then they're going to file an interdict to say, well, he can't participate while we are challenging this in law. It's about interviews that are going to be held in October for the Court and other courts. And they're trying to just block him. And they're going to file another urgent application to say, while we have this review, let's not have him and all of this. It's a strategy. It's a short-term and a long-term strategy. The long-term is just their pursuit of Hlophe, as they've always done. The short-term is to make sure that in the interviews that are coming in October for judges to occupy the Constitutional Court and other courts, he doesn't sit. And I think we must know that strategy for what it is. But I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about the fact that these people who are pursuing him continue to preach reconciliation when it comes to us and what happened to us, but are unrelenting in pursuing those who are like us, that they don't like, that threaten their comfort. And I think they should know themselves that what they are doing takes us nowhere. And it will lead to revolution that they will not be able to tolerate. They will not be able to contain.
And the sitting president, Cyril Ramaphosa, is facing a matter, the Phala saga, but we have not seen him being held to account for that misdemeanor, if you like, or those allegations, which didn't stand the test of time. Now, what do you think is likely to happen? Do you believe that, in fact, we are all equal before the law, or some animals are more equal than others?
We're not equal. We're not equal before the law. I mean, that judgment that sent Zuma to jail says it somewhere, one paragraph, or these are extraordinary times, circumstances, and this is an extraordinary litigant. How do you depart from formal processes of sending someone to jail because they are an extraordinary person? So we're not equal. We're not equal before the law. And I think one day we will find out who's pursuing what at the moment. So I think we need to revisit justice as a concept. We need to get back to an understanding that the real test for justice is what we do with people we don't like. Because justice should be able, it's the benefit of largely people who need it. And those are people who are despised, people we don't like. And so for me, I think your question about the equality before the law, I must declare that the question you ask, every question you've been asking me relates to a matter. Well, Arthur Fraser is my client, the one who reported this. So I've got to declare that first. So my view may be biased on this question. But to the extent that the president did not deny keeping that money, so I'm going to venture into those merits because he doesn't deny it. He has his story about it, but that will be determined maybe the day courts deal with people equally. But I do think I was not too disappointed that the president kept that money, which is unlawful. Because individuals are like that. I was more disappointed that state institutions that should operate independently of individuals that engage in misdemeanors all collaborated to protect one person. I was similarly, and I'm not just saying this because it's Cyril. Even under Zuma, I was very, very unhappy with how Nkandla was dealt with, personally. Because I think when you are a president, you should actually lead by example. you are actually a servant of that society. And you are actually the first person to subject yourself to bigger scrutiny. And it doesn't mean you must be perfect. But I expect someone who's a president not to be above the law. In fact, to be the first one to subject themselves to it. And that's why I think what the ANC did and what other state institutions did to protect the president is something that will live with us for a long time, and it will trickle down to add to unlawfulness in the country, to lawlessness in society. Because when those at the top use law to protect themselves, use state institutions to protect themselves, well, you have no authority or legitimacy to pursue Joe Soap stealing and killing and robbing a bank, because you've told them that everyone must do as they like depending on the level where they are.
They're learning from the best.
They are learning from the best. And I'm very pleased sometimes, as I say, the CIC here goes to court, subjects himself to it, and all of that. I think that's what we must do rather than avoid a court. Go there. And some of these courts themselves, they're hardworking magistrates and judges who mean well. But they too can be tools of ruling elites because they are part of the political system. And I think in South Africa, that's where we are. And I'm disappointed that state institutions and the law and judicial processes have become lenient to those who are powerful.
Can judges distinguish or draw a line between politics and law in arriving at perhaps delivering a verdict? Can they maintain their bias or impartiality, rather?
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with being biased and having a particular worldview in life. But you must be honest about that view. And if holding that view makes it impossible for you to objectively assess evidence before you, you should be the first to say, I'm not the right person to deal with this thing. So if, for instance, I'm a judge, and it happens when I'm an acting judge, if a matter comes and it's, somehow one of the parties is someone I know or a company that's been my client, I usually call those parties to chambers and say, guys, I have this history with this litigant. Are you comfortable with me? Some say yes. Most of the time they'll say yes, because people understand when you are open about what could be a bias on your side. And when I say, I'm not saying people should not be biased. I mean, people must be honest that I am biased and therefore I'm not the right adjudicator. I think our judges in political matters in particular fail to make that distinction. There's a difference between politics and party politics. Politics is what we do in law, in this studio, and everywhere. The water you are about to drink. It's politics. It's produced at the expense of certain black workers who got nothing from it. The suit I'm wearing and everything. So everything is politics. The law is politics. What I think is required from a person who's a judge is integrity and honesty. It's the ability. People say to me, no, but you can't just raise a recusal. The fact that we have to apply to a judge to recuse themselves is a sign of the level of depravity that our judges can't see for themselves. You see, you recuse yourself every time you think in this matter that you must decide, there's an outcome that you like too much. You shouldn't be told. You know yourself. You know yourself that there's a party that... So if you brought one of my clients, and I'm an acting judge now, and Zuma was a party, I tell you now, I wouldn't hear the matter. I know myself that I'm an objective person, but it's not about me. It's about the others. So I wouldn't hear that matter. If you brought Julius, the CIC, who was once my client, before me as a judge, I would recuse myself. I wouldn't need any lawyer to apply. Out of my own conscience. Not because I will be biased, because I must guard against the possibility that I'm attached to a client. So I would refuse. I would rather err on the side of caution than injustice. And that's what is required. It's not perfection. It's just the ability. Judges know themselves. the judges who wrote that judgment in the Constitution, you can see it that they dislike Zuma. You can see it as you read it. You can see the anger. You can see it. Please, man, a judge should not sit in adjudication of a matter when they feel such animosity towards any of the litigants. And I think that is what we are failing to do. To separate our professionalism from our views, And if we can't, to be honest, that, in this matter, I can't. I'm not the right person. What those judges should have done, those who hate him, is to say, we hate Mr. Zuma. We're not the right people to sit here. Get others. That's what you do.
That said, do you think the judiciary is captured?
Okay. Why are people refusing to get Hlophe to the JSC? It's because they too are trying to capture the judiciary to reflect their interests. The judiciary must always be careful what it reflects. It's always captured. It's always captured. The question is captured by what? Right? And if you are captured by your obsession with defending society against injustice, well, that's good capture. But if you are captured by a minority that's trying to protect their own criminality and illegality, then that's bad capture. And I think judges need to reflect about their country. What really captures them, their conscience? What is it that makes them wake up every morning to serve that nation? Who are they serving? And if they are captured by that desire to serve justice for the majority and for everybody, it's good capture. If they are serving ruling elites in capital, domestic and global, or those who pay them, if they are judges who get paid for this, then that is wrong. That kind of capture is wrong. But these institutions, these organizations that don't want Hlophe at the JSC, they're not looking for integrity. It's because they want interviews to happen in such a way that they too can control the JSC so that their own candidates who must protect their interests must be appointed. It's political. Don't allow any of these NGOs to tell you that what they are doing is not political. It's political. They are trying to stop anyone who will be seated there and stop the chances of their own preferred candidates making it to the judiciary. It's, honestly, if they are honest with you, that's what it's about. They can deny it all they like. That's what it's about. And they don't want to see Hlophe there. He's a very intelligent man. And the kind of questions he'll be asking their preferred candidates will expose their preferred candidates that they parade as intellects, when actually some of them are dropouts from the legal profession who shouldn't get anywhere near our court.
Justice Mandi Samaya is a candidate for the position of Chief Justice. Do you think she's fit for the office, to occupy the office?
I'm biased again because I know her and I'm close to her. But let me say, I can be objective. I know her and it's someone I love very much and a colleague that I respect. I think it's not often that I feel comfortable with an appointment. She's one of those few that I think we got it right. I'm not talking about the circumstances under which she was appointed and all of this, but I think as a person, forget the institution, I think we made the right choice. She's a great person, a great lawyer, and has integrity. And by the way, being a judge has two components. Part of it is knowing the law. And you can know the law. It's not a problem. The biggest part of being a judge is being a good and just human being. That's the most difficult part. You must hope to get the other part of a just and good human being, because he can learn the law and probably already knows it. What people can't learn is being good and just and conscientious human beings. You must hope in your system that you get those individuals to occupy the judiciary. Just good people, that's all you need. Just good human beings with sufficient intellect to grasp complex issues of the law and society. That's it. And I think she's one of those, and there are many others.
Yeah.
But the judiciary as a system, for me, has failed us in many cases that are political. I think there's something they need to do, some soul searching.
How has it failed us?
I think they've been unable to rise above particular biases and narratives in society about certain people. Those who are disliked, let's say if it's Julius or it's Zuma. And I think our judges have failed, in my view, to distance themselves from those narratives in society. I don't think they are aware. I don't think they do it deliberately. I think it comes out of being a human being is also about constantly questioning your position. And I think people do very little of that on a daily basis. And I think a judge should be a person with a greater degree of self-reflection. And unfortunately for countries and for society, for world society in general, the world is run by lawyers, economists, journalists, and politicians, all of whom have very little capacity for self-reflection, unfortunately. If they grew a little appetite for self-reflection, we would have a very peaceful world and a just country.
Yeah.
That's what the judiciary must do. I don't think it's all lost. And I think we must look at how we appoint judges and who becomes a judge, so that we don't just get dropouts from the legal profession just simply because they want a pension, lifelong pension. We need to get people who are good, who are committed to it. And I don't think that's too much to ask. Yeah, I think but I think with the Chief Justice Maya, I do think as a person, because I know her, I hope the system doesn't swallow her into its belly.
The same way it swallowed the ANC.
It can swallow you, it can swallow me. That's why I say you need to constantly check yourself in
positionality.
Life, the position, yeah. You know, in life, they say it's not enough to be correct. You must constantly check your correctness. I constantly check even the views I express, because it's important to know that you could be wrong.
No, true.
You know.
As a professional journalist, I think I'll do some self-introspection into my profession as well.
Journalism is an interesting part, because I was saying in another interview, when you tell our journalists that, you tend to serve white narratives. Say, no white person has ever told me what to write. And I say to them, that's exactly the problem. They no longer have to tell you.
Because they control the media. They control the mindset.
Where your bread is buttered.
Yeah.
You sit with your little friends in Rosebank in those pseudo non-racial restaurants, and you want to please your white friends by being different from us. They've got you already. You've already part of their narrative. They don't need to tell you what to write. You get into their newsroom. Who owns it? You know what will make you get promoted. It's disliking Muzi, disliking Julius, disliking Zuma, disliking black people will get you far. So they don't need to tell you. That's the problem of a powerful system. It doesn't need to tell you what to do. You know what to do. You know what will serve your interests if you want a promotion.
Yeah.
You know who you must hate and who you must like and what views to express. And so they don't need to tell you.
Yeah.
And that's why in journalism itself, it's an important tool of both freedom and repression. You must just decide which part are you.
I think I'm glad to be on the part of the left, because I'm with the EFF.
You're very lucky. It's a moment I said in history you must appreciate that you are in an environment that keeps checking your conscience. And you are lucky. Others are doing nothing. They move from the newsroom to eat sushi at lunch with their white and other friends and their non, and they have no time to look at themselves about the lie they live. So you are lucky. You live in an environment that constantly encourages you to be critical. Others are not. They're not bad people, but they live in an environment that is controlled by others, by capital. When you control capital, you control people's thinking because they want to survive. And
True.
so because they want to survive, they tend to do and parrot what you like so that they can keep their bonds, keep their lifestyles, until black people control the economy.
The means of production.
Means of production, we will always be subservient to other interests, even in our private lives. Very, very few people are prepared to go hungry and starve and lose a house just because they want to express their views. Many people think I'm a bit odd that I'll express these views. Well, I grew up with nothing, so actually I live in a nice house, that's true. But I can actually live in a shack where I grew up. I can live in a rural area, Rondaville House. I'm not scared of that. And so sometimes capital operates on our fear to lose what we've acquired. But I think some of us must be able not to care. And if truth is important to you, well, it should be only wealth you own. When we grew up, you were asking me what we used to do. I'm going to tell you a sordid story. I wanted to be a priest. And then it didn't work out because they couldn't take me. I was late and I went to become a teacher. But actually one of my ambitions when I was a teenager, not a teenager, when I was 20, because during our years, we didn't know that there would be freedom. So your ambitions were limited. You could be a teacher maybe or a nurse. My ambition was a sordid ambition. Like, you knew you were going to go to jail or you're going to die.
Those were the two options.
Two options. If you're an activist, or you're going to become a teacher, whatever, or a nurse or a policeman, it doesn't. But one of the things biggest for most of us who are activists, don't want to get arrested. But when I die, I would like a big funeral with activists. And then after my funeral, there will be mayhem and freedom would come.
Okay.
It's an ambition I had.
That's why freedom fighters were never scared of dying.
No,
never scared of death.
because we knew that there are two options. You're going to go to jail, you're going to die. And what can you hope for? A funeral that would gather revolutionaries. And maybe at that funeral, that would be the end of white rule. People still ask me today, are you not scared about your life? No, I am. Many people are. But if you want to ask me, what do I choose to die of between diarrhea and dying speaking my truth?
Speaking with the truth to power.
I would actually choose dying violently, speaking the truth I'm telling, than dying of diarrhea in a hospital. It's a choice. That's what we grew up. We made that choice. And so, not that I'm not scared of death. I am.
Yeah.
No one wants to die. But we must accept death as a possibility of truth-telling. And I've accepted it as something that can happen. I would prefer that to dying in trivial pursuits and some disease in hospital.
I know you're not an EFF member, or maybe you are, advocate, but what do you think of the EFF cardinal pillars, and considering the outcome, the 7 cardinal pillars, and considering the outcome of the 2024 general elections, would you say that the people of South Africa perhaps missed an opportunity to usher in a political party or a government that will usher in economic freedom in our lifetime?
Yeah, I think the EFF for me was quite a brave initiative. Let me start at the beginning. When it started, really a brave initiative for young people to do what Julius Floyd and others did was, for me, phenomenal. And no one actually in this country has a history of forming a political party that way with so much resources, right? So as I appreciate the fact that those young people could do this. And we must not forget they're young. So if you ask me what opportunities have we missed, I think the result of this election does not point to a weakness in the EFF. It points to what I call is a stagnation in society, of confusion. Because I do think that MK, the emergence of MK, took a bit from both the ANC and the EFF. So when you analyze where the EFF is, you must not forget of those dynamics of what happened. I think without the emergence of MK, I think EFF would actually have moved slightly. And I think the EFF itself, probably with its experience in government, now, of the parties that are on the left, it's a party that must seriously consider preparing itself with others to run the alternative state at some point. And I don't think the setback, well, this was not a setback. I think they stagnated. I think there may be trust issues that the EFF needs to reflect about. Trust issues, because when you become part of the electoral process, people sometimes cease to see you as a revolutionary. And so they need to go back to those 7 cardinal pillars and leave them, not in parliament, leave them outside. The politics is outside. You can never win anything in parliament that you can't win in society, especially if you're not a ruling party. And the opportunity for the EFF, for MK, for ATM is now, because they've been left out of this GNU circus without comedians. It's a circus, and I'm happy they are not. And I think they need to galvanize society. Those 7 cardinal pillars is what, in my view, should define a national liberation agenda for a country like ours. They just need to galvanize more support, and probably them and MK and others set differences apart. They have one thing in common. The liberation of an African person should be paramount to them. I love all of those parties. I love them more than I love the party, the ANC, that I came from, because I think, as I said, it's in the belly of global capital. But I grew up in it, but I think it's in the belly. These are the parties that I think have the courage. The EFF has the courage, has the potential, has the leadership to actually pursue national liberation, and must avoid and probably look out for being trapped in electoral politics and forget that victory is outside parliament in society. That is where the strength of the EFF, MK, ATM, AZAPO, PAC should be. Because elections and parliament, these institutions can trap you into their own system. And you forget that there is a struggle you can fight lawfully, but outside parliamentary structures. I think the EFF must go back to those.
Absolutely.
They encouraged a lot of us when they were in the streets. Lawfully, probably they were the most disciplined party in the streets. No looting when they march. And they should have continued, and I think it's still an avenue together with other parties.
As a parting shot advocate...
But I'm not a member of any political party.
Okay, noted. But I like your views, and not legal advice this time, but just expression of confidence in the EFF. And as perhaps a parting question, I would want to know what sets you apart from other lawyers, because in my view you are among the best. You're a legal beast.
I don't know whether many colleagues would say that. I think I don't define myself as a lawyer first. You see, I think that's what maybe sets me apart negatively or positively. I don't know. It depends on. Is that I first define myself as a human being that lives to pursue justice for others. You know, law is a one area where I thought, and I still think we can pursue that, but law, I don't define myself. And I think that's what, if you want me to say what sets me apart, is that I am never discouraged by the trappings of being a senior lawyer to forget that actually I don't exist to be a lawyer. I exist to be a human being to pursue justice for others. And so I think that kind of attitude, it has had its own impact on my life financially, because you don't get paid for being a revolutionary. You get paid for pursuing going to court every day and charging fees. And so I think I am still more concerned about things I was concerned with when I was 18, same way as I am now, even as a lawyer.
Yeah.
Money and being a lawyer has not made me depart from the pursuit of freedom for others.
So there's money in law.
Oh yeah. No, you know, you can
Good money.
you can live comfortably as a lawyer. In fact, you can afford to keep quiet. You can actually, in fact, if you keep quiet, I think more will come, because I speak now, I offend powerful people with money who will never brief me. It's a risk I take. So there is money in law. But those who control money also want to tell you how to live your life, how to behave. And so if you are foolish like me and you want to speak your mind about things that offend the powerful, you must also know you're not going to have as much money as those who choose to keep quiet.
Yeah.
You know, so, but, you know, money is not something that, you know, my mother told me that it's better to actually die in dignity, starve in dignity, than eat in shame.
Shame, yeah.
You're better off, you know. So to calculate wealth on the basis of how much money you have is such a level of depravity. You should calculate wealth on the basis of your contribution to society and the lives of others. And I think if you calculate that, I think I'm comfortable with what I'm doing.
And I must say outrightly that I'm personally inspired by you as an advocate and senior counsel. I think I drew a lot of inspiration from the time you were representing former President Jacob Zuma. At the time, I was still working for a commercial radio. So they used to...
You were sitting in newsroom saying, this one is more political, it's not a lawyer.
And you know what my colleagues used to say? They used to say, you see, you argue like him, eh? I was like, really? I was like, oh, okay. So I really draw a lot of...
It's because those newsrooms are full of people who are trying to impress those who control them. You know, it's wrong to argue for justice. It's right to argue for a contract for a big company. It's that we've been taught that there's a distinction. There's no distinction. Justice is justice. And people say sometimes I'm emotional about this. You know, if injustice doesn't make you emotional, you're not a human being. If injustice doesn't make you emotional, you are not human.
Yeah. Period. No, thank you very much, Advocate Muzi Sikhakhane, Senior Counsel, for making time for us. Yeah, we really appreciate. We have learned a lot, and we hope those who have got ears will listen.
Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me. I think you guys have a good setup.
Absolutely, Advocate. So, song of the day, the song that you would like to dedicate to the fighters, the commissars, the people of South Africa and Africa at large.
Absolutely. You know, I told you that the song that we must fight this elsewhere, not in Parliament. There's a song, it's a version of our revolutionary song called Emaweni.
Oh, Emaweni. I think our particular producer will just look for it there.
Different version, but it tells you where we prepare to fight. It's a beautiful song. A struggle song. I think that's what I want to dedicate to the CIC, to the leadership of the EFF, all the commands, student commands, and everybody.
You sound very revolutionary, Advocate.
I was.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much, the people of South Africa, Africa and the world. This is the song that is playing in the background, dedicated by Advocate Muzi Sikhakhane. So I hope you have learned quite a lot from him, just a fountain of knowledge and wisdom. So now we have come to the end of the show. Please remember to subscribe to the EFF YouTube channel. Remember, we won't feed you crumbs on the EFF podcast. So my name is Titus Tsungu. Until we meet again, kuda ikwengeta.